ready when you are.
We all set? You all set, Carol?
Yep.
Okay, Jamie, we're good to go. This is the Real Estate and Open Space Committee meeting for November 19th, 2021. We met at 8:30 in executive session. We have since adjourned from that and are now calling to order our regular session. Welcome, everyone. Art Bowden, nice to see you, sir.
Yeah, I'm Jim McGrath. I live on Bank Street.
Hi, Jim.
Just visiting.
Thank you for
Sorry,
joining. Jim McGrath
Jim.
and Art.
And, oh,
Mr. McCaskill.
yeah. I'm having trouble recognizing everyone behind their mask.
And Amy. Okay, first on the agenda is to approve the minutes from the October 15th, 2021 meeting. Motion to approve,
I so move.
second,
second.
okay. Any changes, questions, changes,
Nope.
corrections? No? All in favor of approving it?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, good. Okay, Mr. McCaskill, if you'd like to join us up here, because this is where we're really going to need some input from you. We spent our last meeting, all of it, on the questions of owners unknown properties and other properties that we would consider recommending to the Board of Selectmen, either for conservation, housing, or maybe even disposal. Carol and I worked several hours to kind of get it all down into this little spreadsheet here. I'm sorry you didn't get it sooner, that you couldn't have looked it over beforehand. My objective today was to look over this spreadsheet and to forward this on to you and to the Board of Selectmen. I think maybe our takeaway from today's meeting will be to write a narrative to go with this, because some things have to be, I guess, fleshed out a little more and a little more explanation. And then if the Board of Selectmen so desires, we could come to a meeting, and if Dave is able to attend, be able to do the maps, the Google Earth, like we've been using it, which I think is a great visual for some of these. And then wait for direction from you all as to what you want us to do next. I mean, we can certainly look at parcels and that have been suggested in the past that could be disposed of, and money used for whatever, to sell the property and then put it back on the tax rolls. Just put the money to the Affordable Housing Trust, whatever you all deem should happen to it. But we'd just like to move forward with some of this, because some of these properties, it's been a long time. It's been a long time. Dave, would you like to, I think if we prioritize this, I think right now, number one on my list would be the Little Shaver Lane properties. Okay. And it has come to our attention, thank you, Margot, that there, properties down there, some of that property's been cleared, and there has been approval from the planning board for a subdivision. And that's only, I think, about 3 acres. Am I right, Dave?
It's a
Is
little over 3 acres.
Little over 3 acres. The rest of the property is still, that's been our priority for quite a few years. Now, there's a question about it. Dave, do you want to, just found
yeah.
out from the assessor?
This last week, a tree cutting machine came in on Route 39 and cut a road. Before this meeting, I went down to the assessor's office. And as far as they knew at this point, There's no map and parcel number associated with it. Now, when I became aware of this potential, which was over a year ago, I went to, well, somebody had called me who lived on Little Shaver Lane to tell me about the bulldozer that had gone in there. Because this property was of interest to this committee in 2012 when I joined. Dave Spitz was the one who brought up the attention on it. And so I went for a run and went down there and found that, in fact, there were test pits dug. I said, all right. After my shower, I ran down to health department saying, you know, when did this sell? What's the story? And I said, what's the map and parcel number? They didn't have one. I said, why are we doing, as a town, taking action on a property, we don't even know whether these people own it? Not our job. Okay, fine. Whose job is it? Assessors. So I go to the assessor's office. They weren't aware of it, and I kept track of that over the coming weeks. And Donna had said they had received plans from an engineer, but they had not accepted those plans because there were things that were questionable on them. For example, I think the biggest example was it referred to Middle Road, and Middle Road never has gone through that piece of property. And I've been checking in on a regular basis to say, is a map and parcel? Well, this morning, there's still no map and parcel number, as far as I know. Yet, the planning board approved a subdivision on it. So my question is to the town, not to you necessarily, Mike, but you as chair of the selectmen should be able to get an answer to this. Because I checked around trying to find somebody who would give me a legal opinion. I couldn't get anybody to give me a legal opinion on it either. But it's appalling that I could go up to 6 ponds and, you know, and all the property in Copless that's listed as owners unknown, I could start cutting wood. And I could start chopping that stuff down. If I'm wrong, I just walk away. So what? And so, you know, this property is under threat, clearly under threat. And I agree that it remains, in my book, the number 1 parcel because it is so close to town wells. It abuts conservation land. And if, you know, if you gotta take it by eminent domain, just move it along. And we have asked, you know, we've said this before to the town administrator, and I met with him, and he was gonna go find somebody to do the deed research, and nothing ever happened. And that was what, probably 5 years ago?
At least, yeah.
And this is, from my perspective, it really makes me feel like my time is wasted on this committee because there has been no action.
Agreed.
All right?
The 31 acres you have listed here, is that 31 acres including what they just carved out?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And I've got the plan that's here that's been approved by our, you know, by our administration here in the, you know, the department.
It's really not a lot different than what we're dealing with on Hall's Path by the sounds of it. So, and we are litigating Hall's Path, and we're not letting up on that. So this sounds like it needs to be added to that.
This
So
is another case of it, and I'm just concerned that we're gonna see that in all of these properties, because once they've invested money in it, they, you know how the court system's going. And, so that remains the high one for me as well. I also would say that on this list, there is a number of these that where the taxes due is so far beyond what the assessed values are. Now, I realize that's not the same as an appraisal. There's just no reason for these things to ever have stayed on the tax list, tax lien list for this long. And something needs to be done there as well. No brainer. I don't think it needs to be discussed, to tell you the truth, in any of that stuff. Just take it and you know, if it's good for conservation, and anything, there's a list of description here. So, but if we're not gonna move, if things aren't gonna happen with some of the recommendations here, I'm not sure that I can continue to devote my time to this. So,
Well, Dave is a valuable asset that we don't want to lose. I
That's for
think
sure.
we're all aware of that.
No question.
Yeah, so,
That's for sure.
yeah, and, you know, some of these properties, you know the old thing, you gotta spend some money to make money? Well, maybe spending some to clear up some of this and then resell it or whatever you do, put it back on the tax rolls. I mean,
If I can, I'd just make one general statement. Y'all have to recognize at this point that this has been discussed on the board level more than it ever has been over the last 3 months. So discussion is just that, it's discussion. But we've also spoken to attorneys. We've also put out feelers for tax title examiners. We've also pulled money out of different spots in budget to make things happen. We also just took by eminent domain a property on Route 124 in the middle of the Marshline property, which went before Fall Town Meeting and actually passed really by a landslide. So the appetite is obviously there from the taxpayers in town to start fixing this. So whatever's happened in the past has happened in the past. This week's agenda for the Board of Selectmen is a conversation about a working group. And that working group has come to fruition now because of all of the laws that are involved in this. And it's to get our staff together. So the assessor, the Board of Assessors, the tax collector, the attorneys, the town administrator, to put a group together that can actually do something and to actually have something ready for May town meeting. So my suggestion on this, if this is your suggestion, I'm thinking a little more globally than this because our miscellaneous parcels are something that I think we should take as a group. Maybe not all of the owners unknown, because not all of the owners unknown are unknown. They know they own it. And since we started talking about this a few months ago, they're coming out of the woodwork now with deeds and titles and protecting their property because they know that there's a risk that the town will take it. So people are starting to pay attention and show up. We're getting a flood of phone calls into the assessor's office. So to your point, Dave, I recognize, I can't tell you over the last 7 years how much time I feel like I've wasted on things that have just fallen down on the wayside, but the board's paying attention. The town administrator's paying attention, and we realize on many levels, not just conservation, not just housing, but our tax mess. We have $4.7 million roughly in accruing interest that's never gonna go away until we deal with this. So as we put this group together, the initial discussion is this week, but I imagine that we'll walk out of the room with an order to the town administrator to get going on it. I would ask that you prioritize this, as you said, and put Little Shaver back to the top, if that's the board's priority, and then submit this to the Board of Selectmen with a narrative. You know, you can see the tax column and the percentage of tax that's owed on these properties. To me, it's a no-brainer. Little Shaver is gonna be interesting because there's quite a few of the 5 players that are involved in that Little Shaver that own little pieces of that out there that are probably gonna come out of the woodwork. But my research says there's not a lot of access to that. And now that that subdivision's gone in there and a subdivision plan has been in play, they can't just add on to that subdivision. They'd have to create a new one.
They would have to create a new one, yeah.
So that actually hurts them more than it helps them.
It could be true, but the fact that they've been able to do the deed research
I agree.
around it, if they own it, and, you know, that's a big if in my book until, you know, the assessors,
Those are holes in our system. I mean, and those are long-time holes in the town of Harwich's system. And if you look at other towns, they don't have these holes.
Margot?
Several things. I agree with Dave that this is a really high priority, and my hair got on fire when I was walking over there the other day and all of a sudden noticed, you know, that the trees had been bulldozed, and I called John Eidman about it, and that's when I first found out that there was a subdivision plan that had been approved 2 years ago by the planning board, and I didn't know about it. And one of the things that I think, you know, for your working group is there needs to be a link between the planning board and the assessor's office when land comes before the planning board for a subdivision. There needs to be some kind of process for determining, does this person actually own this land? And secondly, when a subdivision is approved, the assessors need to get that into their records ASAP, so that everybody knows what's going on. So that's one thing. Vis-a-vis this list, and I said this to Isabel by email yesterday, there's some really big things missing on this list. And the reason that they're missing, for the most part, is because they don't have map and parcel numbers. That, you know, some big chunks of undeveloped land in town that aren't listed at all in the assessor's records. And, you know, we've talked about one of those areas, you know, up in the Six Ponds area. There's another one south of the transfer station area. And some of the parcels on the east side of Hawks Nest and South Whitefield Road. I'd like to add in some of those parcels to the list, because particularly the stuff in, you know, on the east side of South Whitefield, there's a broken up pattern of land ownership in there, but there's a bunch of owners unknown in there. And that's an area that the town could have some real influence over what happens in there if we have some ownership interest. So, and there's a lot of land there. You know, you have one parcel of land that's, you know, 5 acres, you have an abutting one that's 7 acres, and, you know, that adds up to a lot. And it could be something that could be used for housing, it's something, some of it could be open space, some of it could be for other municipal purposes. But for us to have, and when I say us, I'm talking about the town, to have some influence over what happens there rather than just letting it happen in sort of a random fashion, that seems to me like it would be worthwhile.
I think
So-
one of the properties on Hawks Nest Road is on the tax lien list.
The one owned by Kaloji.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
I'm aware of it.
okay,
yeah.
all right.
So I think we ought to add a few things to the list, and I actually did it yesterday. I mean, what I don't have is I don't have the 3 columns that you guys researched on the assessed value, you know, and what the
Right.
tax status is. I don't have that information, but I put in all the rest of it.
Okay.
So I think it'd be relatively easy to add it into
If you
the
can,
list.
if you can share that to Carol,
Yeah,
then she can, yeah,
Okay.
she's the
okay.
keeper of that.
And, you know, there are at least a couple of parcels in here that are really substantial in size. And, you know, I think they ought to be high up on our priority list, because that's a place where we can make a big difference if we have some control. So,
Good, okay.
yeah.
Give that to, James, you at one time were on the planning board.
Correct.
Can you address what Margot said about the planning board being aware and connecting with the assessor's office? Do you have any insight?
Well, I mean, basically, the planning board does not do independent research into the ownership. The planning board, you know, required, well, when I was there anyway, required a representation that they were entitled to the property. But the planning board did not do any independent research into that. Now, you know, basically, I don't think it would be a problem, you know, for the planning board to request, you know, sort of map and page, you know, of the recording information, and also, you know, what the assessor's information was, you know, on projects that come in front of the planning board.
Mhm. Well, you know, if there was a process like that in place, and I'm sure John Eidman knows way more about this
Yeah.
than I do, and he wasn't here when all of that happened, but it could avoid the kind of thing that happened on Hall's Path, you know, because everybody would have gotten a heads up before the bulldozers went in that, you know, this land was being subdivided or proposed for subdivision. And I'm sure part of it is a staffing problem, you know, that everybody's busy and has so much to do that you know, to take on something like this, which is big and complex, is you know, very time consuming and difficult, but it's it's crazy to let it go. The town could really do a lot to manage its own future by managing these lands.
Yeah, could I just say something in addition, maybe a little bit in defense of the planning board? All the planning board's meetings are completely public. You know, the proposals that are going in front of the planning board are publicly advertised.
Oh, I know that.
You know, so basically, anybody who is interested could just keep an eye on what's going on the planning board and attend planning board meetings. So it's not like the planning board is doing this type
No,
of
no,
information.
no, and I
in
didn't mean
secret.
to imply that at all.
Oh, okay, well,
No.
But most people are not looking at those notices.
No,
but-
They're not
but-
watching the planning board meeting,
no,
they're not.
but the planning board gives the opportunity for anybody who is interested. Now, you know, you can't demand that everybody is interested, and most people, I think in reality, due to other concerns that they have, you know, don't sort of pay attention until they see a bulldozer
Yeah.
going down the street,
That's
and they
right.
see people removing trees,
Yep.
and don't realize that this was on the planning board agenda, publicly advertised
Right.
through public meetings, where there were public comment and all that, you know, maybe a year, you know, earlier.
Yeah.
Michael, I don't want to hold you up any longer than necessary.
I just want to make a
Yeah,
point.
go ahead.
I understand, but, you know, even those of us who are interested in these things cannot spend our time reading through, quote, agendas of every committee that's working on these types of things. Yes, it's publicly advertised, yes, there is an agenda, but, you know, a lot of times those agendas they're out all of a week ahead of the meeting, and they're also very frequently cryptic, okay? So you really don't know where there's going on. Now you gotta go attend that meeting to be there to find out who's gonna be prepared to respond to it. Meanwhile, we have department offices here, and in the case of the Little Shaver Lane subdivision, the Board of Health was aware of it. They were the first ones, because nobody's gonna go screw around with creating a whole plan for it unless they've got a roughed out plan of what they wanna do, and they do a test pit. Why is the health department not requiring proof of ownership, either through, which would mean through the assessor's office? And I think that's where all of this whole process has to start. But basically, any office here in town, when people, whether it's, in planning and, I don't know all the steps that have to go through with Bill, but I know that Board of Health, but all of them should be requiring a map and parcel number, so it's specified where it is. And if you don't have it, go see the assessor, we're not gonna talk to you. That's my opinion.
So, just for clarification, so what Dave was just talking about, so our form for consideration for Rios to consider a piece of property has map, parcel, and owner on a form, so we don't forget that we need that. But the other, like the planning board and the Board of Health don't have that on the form that they fill?
They don't, no. I know Board of Health doesn't, because I asked.
Oh.
And I said, they may ask for it, but if it's left blank, they don't care. That's the
So
problem.
it's there, they just don't fill it out?
The owner fills out the form, the owner can't fill it out because they don't have a map and parcel number, and it does not matter to the decision about whether they're gonna go conduct that test or not.
But you talked about what the planning board does. Did you say the planning board does have that, though, when they consider
No,
something?
I said the planning board could
Oh, could.
require that. I mean, the planning board does not itself look into title issues. And the planning board takes a representation from the applicant that they have title to the property. Now, the planning board could, and, the town planner is the one that prepares the information that goes to the planning board. It would be easy to just, require on that there's map and parcel number or assessor's number, something that, on the application that goes to the planning board.
Got that, Michael?
Mhm.
Got it.
And I'll send a request, so I'll have some answers for you by midweek. takeaway for everybody is, come to town meeting and advocate for the title examiner that we're gonna put into the budget and the increased legal budget that we're gonna put into it. Because some of the parcels that you have on here, part of the reason they're not being really taxed, we have to find them first. So we have to be able to survey them, we have to know exactly where they are, we have to do our due diligence. We can do an eminent domain taking, but then the work starts. So, and then I would prioritize, add, and try and group. Because if we do one global eminent domain taking for all of our miscellaneous parcels or all of our owners unknown, there'll be some opposition on certain pieces, and we're not gonna wanna fail the entire thing. So I'm envisioning bringing blocks to town meeting for eminent domain takings in an area with a good explanation, which, you know, your good explanation is here. I mean, they haven't had paid taxes, and one of them's 324% over what the valuation is. So we need to go to town meeting, and our plan is, we did it in the fall, our plan is to do it again for the annual town meeting and take more properties by eminent domain. So it's a priority of the board is working on it, the board's gonna need the resources to do it. And then in some of what we're talking about right now, there's certain laws. And last week's meeting, I brought up the sand pit in East Harwich,
Yeah.
and how it's possible that they're only paying $3,000 a year in taxes on that, but yet leasing that many acres to construction companies. So how is it possible that a piece of land of that size is being leased, and the town of Harwich is only collecting $3,000 a year taxes on it? So the answers that I got back weren't sufficient for me, and now we're gonna put all the staff together to find out how we can fix that, and then what laws are in place that aren't allowing us to fix that. Because in some of the conversations, there's certain laws on taxation that we can't change. We need to petition the state to change. So, but we recognize there's a mess. All you have to do is look at our tax liability to realize there's a mess. You don't even have to look at all the parcels. So we need to fix it.
I mean, if there was a policy that said, when a property owner owes a certain amount for a certain period of time, that should trigger a process, at least a letter going. I mean,
We do a lot of that, to be fair, and we do have 2 law firms now doing foreclosure process for us. And once you start that process, people generally start making payments.
right,
So we're not doing anything, but we need to hire more lawyers.
need more.
And do more work, because as soon as you file those, and in some instances, people have said, I don't want that property, and the town will get it, not on a lot of these, and I imagine we'll be in for a fight on Shaver Lane, but
Yeah, I think, you know, most of the properties that are on that tax lien list, or a lot of them, they've had foreclosure things on them for years. Now, there's a house in my neighborhood that's been in foreclosure since 2002. But that's a house, and somebody was living in it, and so you can't, you know,
But,
I understand why you don't want to throw people out on the street, I get
but
it.
still,
But,
I
but,
mean, the argument you get from people is, well, hey, I'm an old lady. You're not gonna put me out on the curb if I don't pay? Then I'm not gonna pay my taxes either. I mean,
right, but if we,
it seems like,
there's a fine line, but we don't have
There
to
is a
talk about
line.
the people in their houses right now. We can
Yeah.
talk about just
Talk about
land.
This-
We got
this is
3
all-
years.
We got
Land.
plenty to do just.
what we have
Yeah.
here is land, and these are not, should not be, you know,
Yeah, there's no
and we'll not
reason to
run
hold
into a
them up.
town meeting problem where somebody says you're throwing them out of their house.
Yeah.
yeah,
As far as
so,
that.
all right, so here's our bottom line. So we will prioritize our list. We will do a narrative to go with it, and maybe include some maps, you know, even just paper maps. Turn it over, and then meet.
Second you turn it over, I'll have you on the agenda the following week,
Okay,
and then we'll
Can I,
discuss it.
can I
Okay.
ask a question? When you say prioritization,
yeah.
these are different types of parcels. You know, there's these little small tax things, clean those things up. And that's really nice, that there's big differences in here. I think it ought to be prioritized by the type they are. Because there's things that, you know, should be, yeah, just take, you know, you go to the tax office and say, work with the lawyers to solve those things. And then there's the big owners on known property, like the Little Shaver Lane and like the Six Ponds area and so on and so forth. Those, I think, are another group. And I don't want to sit there and, there's the low-hanging fruit, I don't think is discussable. The other stuff, I think, really is what needs to be.
Well, I think in the past, that's the way we did present it. We did have it categorized by conservation,
yeah.
whatever, so I think,
But
That's the
that's
same.
what I'm gonna suggest
Okay.
as the methodology, because it makes it clear to them. There's gonna be different people who are working on the foreclosure issues and those things that are,
I agree, and the little tiny parcels that are just cleanup stuff,
Yeah.
that should just be one group.
Yep.
And that's a global taking that shouldn't have any
And
discussion.
there are a bunch of those on this list.
Right.
that,
Right,
you
there
know,
are.
Things that, it's a little piece of wetland, and so it's, as Dave says, it's just cleaning up the records to deal with those, but, there's some much bigger chunks that have a lot more research that are gonna have to be done.
one issue that we do need to be aware of is with that quarter-acre lot that was down on Atlantic Avenue,
oh, yeah.
and this is something the town has to make decisions on, not us, but in that case, the town ended up having to pay more money to dispose of it in order to clear up the title than they were able to get back in return, what I heard was true. In some of these wetland things, I don't know if it's just easier to just write it off because it's just not gonna be worthwhile.
It's a yes and no, because they're always gonna stay on the books, and they're always gonna be a tax liability unless we make the investment to clean it up.
Okay.
So, we really need to clean them up,
Yeah.
regardless of if we go in the hole on a few or not.
Yeah, and my other thing is when just on land, there are owners who are known, who own more than one property, and they're both on the tax lien list. So why just go after why not go after all the properties that person is in arrears on at one time?
Some of that's being done.
Okay, thank you.
Elaine?
Yes,
When we're looking at properties, I think we have to sort of realize that there are different categories of land, and it may be hard to prioritize across those categories. We may want to take a look at categorizing these properties into, like, there's one group that Dave has mentioned, that is the tax lien property. Okay, that's, a fairly straightforward type of approach, and as Mike said, maybe we could group those all together, and just start dealing with that. But then in the owners unknown, I think there are different types of properties that are potential for different uses. And depending on, what the potential use is, and the priorities of the town, are these properties good for town facilities? Like maybe an expansion of the transfer facility? Or are they good for recreational purposes? Or are they good for conservation purposes? Or are they good for, sort of development purposes where the town can acquire them, and then either look at them for affordable housing or for potential sale to develop revenue?
well, I think that's pretty, we kind of did it with this.
Okay.
And here's the point. We can go on forever.
Yeah,
So I would really like to just be definitive with this. And again, we can break them out and prioritize each section. That's the way we've done it in the past. Fine. Then direction from the Board of Selectmen, what would you like us to look at now? Because you have other people also working on all of this. Like you said, the assessor, the Board of Assessors. I was at the meeting with Richard Waystack when you spoke about they're all gonna get together with the tax collector, the assessor, and whatever. So there's a lot of people working on the same stuff. So, once we submit this, then we need direction from you as to what would you like us to do now? What would you like us to focus on?
Yep, I get you. And to Dave's point, let's get something done.
Right,
So let's start
exactly.
with
That's-
this,
that's
so that I
mine.
can show him we'll get something done this year, so he stays.
Yeah, oh. We're gonna hold him hostage.
If you don't, it's okay.
Okay. Marcia, is there anything you'd like to add to the conversation? Are you good? Okay. Carol?
I'd like to just thank Dave for putting that spreadsheet together so we could add to it. It's a lot
Yeah.
easier to add
And
to
I-
than start from scratch.
And I want to thank you for working with me on,
Yeah.
on doing this, because we spent a few hours on this, because I'm not as technical as Carol is. Margot, anything you'd like to add to, on discussion? James,
Well, I
anything?
would just like to ask Mike a question, that's sort of related. Has the town ever given consideration to some form of in-house counsel who could maybe help in managing this whole process?
We have 2 proposals right now.
Okay,
So one is with our current law firm, and one is with another law firm that specializes in this.
okay.
So
but
yes,
That's hiring outside law firms. I mean, I think, you know, somebody who was in-house and who was part of the staff, who knows, you know, the people in all the different divisions that are involved, could maybe be helpful in sort of helping to manage this process, in that it is, you know, a legal, heavily legal documented process.
so the answer is the subcontracting part of this,
Yeah,
there's been no appetite to hire an in-house lawyer.
okay.
The subcontract portion of this would be exactly that though, Jim. It would be somebody dedicated to doing this,
Oh,
not
okay.
everything else. So it would be, here's the scope of work, here's the project, here's what we're trying to clean up, that's what you're working on, and this is who you're working with. Hiring, we're not looking to hire any more full-time employees or create any more union positions. We're looking to have a specialty that is just working on this.
Okay.
Mike,
Okay.
it is, my experience with KP Law, which is not extensive, is that they're really not experts in real estate law. I was very dissatisfied with the meetings that I've had in the past with them. And I would hope that we would, if they're focusing in on real estate, clearing titles and all the rest of that stuff, you get somebody who really knows their stuff.
Dave,
I was given bad information from them before town meeting, and, you know, literally, they were changing what I was told at 1 o'clock, at 4 o'clock in the afternoon for a 6 o'clock town meeting. I was livid, I was absolutely livid.
So I would just answer that with, you would think it'd be easy to go out and give somebody a bunch of money and have them do some work. It's really not that easy, right? All of these people and title examiners, we're having a really hard time with title examiners.
I know.
What you experienced, and we've corrected that. I had a nice meeting with the senior partner for KP Law, Lauren Goldberg, where we expressed our dissatisfaction in some of our legal services. We had the wrong lawyers. So KP Law has a land and title side that they do for a lot of municipalities. We had a lawyer that did everything for us, that dove in on what you're talking about. So going forward, we're gonna use specialty lawyers within that firm to do what we wanna do, not just the lawyer that we have doing general counsel.
Okay?
Yeah,
Yes,
you know, not to conflict with what you said, Mike, but just to support what Dave said, I know when I was on the planning board, we were very dissatisfied with KP Law and ended up going out hiring another firm in Boston to deal with issues that came out of planning board.
Right now, we feel like we're beyond that. Right now, we feel like we have, I think we have new senior, I don't think, we have new senior counsel, Amy Quessel, who is doing the work on Hall's Path for us, and she's been outstanding. So
Okay, good.
it's message heard, and I think we've already addressed that.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Michael, thank you very
You're
much. I
welcome.
know you're busy,
Yep,
so
anytime.
we'll
The
excuse you.
sooner you get that to me, the sooner I'll get it on the
We're
agenda.
on it. Thank you very much.
I would be glad to help with the sorting process if
Okay.
you need another set of
Right.
hands, and I can certainly give you guys the additions that.
Okay, if you can send the additions to Carol.
Mhm.
But I think now even, You know, it can be overwhelming, to be honest. So if you want to get together, Carol, myself, I guess, well, we have a holiday coming up, so.
I mean, I would volunteer to.
Well, then we have to call a meeting. Then we
okay.
have to post a meeting if there's more. But the three of you would like to leave me out of it, that's
No,
okay
I think we
too.
need to have you involved. Because I really think, yeah, it is an overwhelming process. And I'm not sure it's a good idea to do it in the sense of a formal meeting. Although I think a group, whether it's the three of you or whatever, working and coming up with a prioritization proposal then to present to us at a formal meeting would be a better way of doing it.
Okay, let's do this. If you can send the information to Carol. Carol, we can add to this.
Mhm.
Then I can send this out to you all individually. And you can put your priorities.
Okay. Let me tell you, it's hard for me to put the priorities without referring each property, sorry, each piece of property to where it's located on the map, making a determination whether it would be good for town use, whether it would be good for, conservation, whether it would be good for recreation, or whether it would be good for potential development purposes.
Right, right.
So it would be very difficult for me to develop priorities without basically going out and doing an inspection of each property that was on the list.
I don't think there's need to do that.
Well,
Yeah.
so to me, again, what Dave said with the tax lien property, I think it's easy. There's a certain amount of money owed, let's just get that cleaned up. With the owners unknown, I think it's a completely different issue, and, as was mentioned, some of the properties aren't even on the assessor's records.
Yeah, yeah.
So, for me, it's hard to set those types of priorities without defining different categories and setting priorities within those categories. Because also, how the town approaches it is going to determine to some extent what the town priorities are.
Yeah.
The town is just beginning a relook at the comprehensive planning process, which is going to sort of basically set those priorities for the next, 15 to 20 years. So I think it's, as you said, Elaine, it's a very overwhelming process. And while we can take a cut at it, I'm not saying that we can't do it, but I'm just saying that I think it's, very involved and needs a lot of thought.
Well, if we look at this list and we pull out of here the owners unknown and group them,
Right.
just put that as one group. Then the tax lien group. And then break that into whether it's, we recommend it for conservation or for whatever. Or the reason behind, or why we're recommending it.
Right.
Let's keep it as simple as we can,
That's enough
because we can
right there.
just go
Yeah, no.
totally overboard on
No, I
this.
know.
I just want to keep it as simple as we can. And as I said, a narrative with it, present it to the Board of Selectmen, even using the maps, up on the screen so we can show them in different areas. Margot, you can do like you did at our last meeting and point out the different areas. That didn't show up on the recording when you were doing that at the
okay.
map. So that would be, that would be
Yeah.
helpful. And then from there, whatever their directive is, okay, we got this, we're gonna do this and that. Here's what we'd like you to look at next. Okay.
Yeah, I
Just
think
excuse me 1 second, I just want to, Marcia, just 1 second before you leave. Marcia has to leave, so you with
We
us?
did take notes, though. I did take notes of those areas you talked about, and we put the ones we could identify on that list.
Yeah.
But
Thank you.
Yeah.
there may be more, maybe we
Yeah.
found more.
I think what Elaine has suggested makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So we break out the tax lien properties, particularly the ones that, where we know that the amount owed is well
Right.
in excess of the value. And that's a lot of the small stuff on this list. So that's sort of one piece of it. And then the second piece is the owner's unknown. And I think, Jim, I think it's gonna be pretty obvious when you look at the map about where these parcels are, what kinds of uses would be logical to recommend for them.
Okay, good.
You know.
I agree with you.
All right.
So,
So how do we want to partner up?
Well, see, I think, as has been described here, you've got you separate out the owner's unknown stuff, and there's probably 4 major areas of town. And rather than getting down to individual parcels within, and because there are no map and parcel numbers at all, you know, that you simply say, look, there's owner's unknown property in this area, and the town ought to be looking at resolving that with the intention that it would be used for X. So things like looking at the sand pit on Queen Anne, all of that 70 acres that's up in there. I think we would be hard pressed to say anything other than conservation, okay? But it also, you know, it helps save our water supply, there's a whole bunch of other things. Anyway, but we'd use that for conservation. Things like between Hawks Nest Road and 137, there's all kinds of funny business that has to be done in there. And I agree with you 100%, but that the town having some access, you know, some of those parcels in there gets to control.
yeah.
Because if one person gets control of that property, who knows, you know, they could
Yeah.
start putting in malls or something.
Well, I think there's been a discussion about a solar farm there.
Well,
So,
That's a possibility.
it's a possibility.
yeah, it has been,
So-
matter of fact, they mentioned it at the Board of Selectmen
But,
meeting.
but you break up, so that's those 2 areas. Hall's Path area is, you know, similar type of situation. And the stuff near the transfer station is, that would be more for town general use. Because I think those uses can change over time. I mean, they still haven't decided the wastewater plan for, and they're reevaluating that anyway, about whether some area like that may be necessary for a recharge area. I mean, there's general municipal purposes as well. So, but are there any other big areas that,
Those are the big ones.
and
Right.
all of
Those
those,
are the
all of
big
those are
ones.
priorities, but I
Carol,
can't tell you
let's
because
note-
what's the
Yeah,
priorities?
and Little
based
Shaver-
upon what the
Little
goals
Shaver
are
Lane
for
is
the
is
administration?
the other one, and that's already on the list.
Which
So-
one?
So you've got basically 5. You've got the 6 Ponds West, 6 Ponds East,
Yeah.
the transfer station, Little Shaver. That's 4. What did I forget?
Hall's Path.
Hall's Path. That's 5.
Okay.
But, you know, some of those are kind of competitive. In other words, if you're looking at the Little Shaver Lane and, because of the location, Little Shaver Lane and Hawks Nest areas, okay, the sand pit,
Mhm.
they're both for, quote, conservation.
Right.
We need to set a priority on those 2 and let the Board of Selectmen decide what their priorities are. I can't believe that they can fund all of these things at one time.
Mhm. Well, yeah, and you have to look too at the, you know, the relative threat of them
That's true.
being developed
We could-
before the town is able to do its due diligence. So
Okay.
those are all considerations. But, you know, it isn't, I mean, it's very complicated when you get down to the parcel by parcel level,
Right.
but it isn't very complicated when you zoom back, as you just did, and look at the big picture. So, I think we can do this in relatively short order. When are we supposed to meet in December?
That's what I was going to bring up, because it's December 17th, which is the Friday I mean, the next Friday is Christmas Eve, so
Right.
I'm thinking that that time, people maybe are thinking of travel. I don't know, it would be all up to you whether you would be available, or we can just wait till January. But it's up to you. If you feel we need the meeting in December
I think we should
17th,
keep this going if we can.
okay.
You know, because we've got some
I
momentum
was just
on it
concerned that
now.
we were getting
Yeah.
so close to the holiday that
Yeah.
maybe people had other plans and other things going on, and maybe,
It's
so.
always a- it's
But if
always
we
an
all
issue.
agree to it, then,
I'm available.
then we're
Yeah.
good, okay.
I'm gonna
Um,
be around that day.
Okay.
Okay, we're good, okay, so then, skipping along the agenda,
Yep.
then our next meeting date would be 12/17.
Okay.
Okay, good with that, okay. Chair's report. I attended the Board of Selectmen meeting on November 1st to present our annual report. We did get, I don't know if anybody watched it, but we did get some nice compliments, some encouragement, and they were appreciative of and acknowledged the work that we do. So it felt good to get a little pat on the back, and I did acknowledge everybody's work and input, and so I think we did okay. But then, of course, I also brought this up, we need direction, so, okay. Again, we attended various committee meetings for other purposes, and other than that, worked with Carol on this spreadsheet, but that was about it for me. James, anything that you got into or involved in that you'd like to bring up or
No, not
comment?
No.
Margot,
Nope.
anything?
Nope.
No? Carol?
Nope.
Mr. Bowden, would you like to, is there some comment you'd like to,
Art Bowden, Harwich citizen. I just want to say thank you, and it's been a pleasure to come back. I had a little hiatus there. And my comment, I had a comment to make this morning, but one of your members is absent this morning. So actually, I'll tell you, it was a thank you from Habitat. I'm a long time volunteer with Habitat for Humanity, and just recently, Kathy Green and her family made a contribution to Habitat. They're sponsoring a house in Murray Lane, which is the current build here in Harwich, and that's off of Route 28 in West Harwich. And to sponsor a house, the minimum dollar amount is $50,000. So I wanted to thank her from Habitat for her and her family for great generosity, and it keeps that Habitat ball rolling. So
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you, Art. And thank you for joining us again. You're always welcome at our meetings. Mr. McGrath, is there anything you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, do I have to go over there?
No, you can, well, yeah, you should, so they can pick it up on the microphone.
Yeah, hi, Jim McGrath. I live on Bank Street. So I've been a full-time resident for a couple of years. When I moved in, I wanted to see who my neighbors were, and I found next to me, from talking with someone downstairs, that there's an owner unknown piece of land right next to me.
Okay,
And I don't know what's on the list, but I guess I'd like to be great if this particular small piece of property, it's like, I don't know, 3/4 of an acre. It'd be great if it was on the list.
all right, do you,
Map and
the map and parcel number, or?
Yeah, actually,
Okay.
yeah. 32 B6R.
B6R?
Yeah. It's off Bank Street. It's in Grassy Pond, so it's all wetland.
That may be, that may have been one of the things that was on our,
Not on this list.
not
Not
on
on
this
this
one
Not on this
here.
particular list.
But it is, I think it is a property that we did talk about at one time.
I'm sure. yeah,
Right,
okay.
yeah,
And it's unbuildable, there's no road frontage, it's in the swamp, basically. But
yeah.
it abuts my property, and I wasn't sure how things were gonna progress here, but if there is no owner, and if it was for sale at a reasonable price, I'd buy it and donate it to the Harwich Conservation Trust.
Oh,
So,
okay.
I just wanted to throw this out here that, 32B6R.
Okay. After we adjourn our meeting, Mr. McGrath, if you would wait just for a minute?
Sure.
And then I can get your contact information?
Yeah, happy to, yeah.
Okay, yeah, well,
Great.
thank you very
I'll,
much.
I'll find the map on it,
Yeah, he's,
Arsenal, in just a second.
he's our map guy.
Great.
Guy.
I thought of one other thing.
Ooh,
I read in the paper a week or so ago that Paul Whittegren died.
mhm.
And I just wanted to acknowledge that he chaired this committee for quite a few years after Isabel Smith passed. And he did a wonderful job. And, I just thought his service to the town should be recognized.
Thank you, yes, definitely, yeah. I didn't realize he had been on this committee, because
Yeah.
I guess that was way before me.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it was
way
back
before.
in the early 2000s.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
yeah, before me. Oh, well, okay. Yes, thank you for doing that, Margaret, that's very nice. Anything else? We're good? I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
All right.
Aye. Thank you all. Jamie,